This is a video I've been wanting to do for a while now, so I'm really excited to finally get this out. The history of the Lone Ranger and the Green Hornet are inextricably tied together. The Lone Ranger got its start as a radio show on WXYZ in Detroit in 1933, created by Fran Stryker and George W. Trendle. The Green Hornet also got its start on WXYZ in 1936 and was also created by Fran Stryker and George Trendle. Not only were the two radio shows created by the same team for the same radio station, but the Lone Ranger's real name is John Reed, while the Green Hornet's name was Britt Reed. Eventually, this was made explicit in the show that Britt Reed is the Lone Ranger's grandnephew. Unfortunately, the rights to the Lone Ranger were sold to another company, and this crossover was never fully explored until 2016, when Dynamite Comics released a 5-issue crossover series featuring the Lone Ranger and the Green Hornet, with a surprising appearance from Batman, of all people. The series, written by Michael Uslan, tries to capture the feel of late 1930s America, a country that is changing, as seen through the eyes of the Lone Ranger, but a country that is also apprehensive about the rise of fascism around the world. There are cameos from famous people of the time, including Jesse Owens, Eliot Ness, Teddy Roosevelt in a flashback, and of course FDR. The story is also filled with flashbacks to the Lone Ranger at the height of his strength and power, which contrasts nicely with where he is seen in the present, a relic of an older age. Or at least that's how he sees himself. I think the story is a good story that sometimes tries to be too clever, but mostly succeeds in what it's trying to do. I love the endnotes at the back of each issue, putting the characters and places in proper perspective. Britt Reed is younger in this story. He hasn't taken over the paper yet, at least not at the beginning. He has been traveling the world training, but he isn't the Green Hornet yet. John Reed wants Britt to assume the mantle of the Lone Ranger, but Britt has different ideas of the kind of hero needed for the time, something the Lone Ranger has trouble accepting. In this story, Eliot Ness approaches the Lone Ranger asking for help. The German-American Bund, essentially the Nazi Party in the U.S., are killing off German scientists who have fled to come to the United States, and they are doing so in the most gruesome way. Ness needs the Lone Ranger's help not only to stop the killings, but to stand against the spread of fascism in the United States. He is important, not just as a man, but as a symbol. He agrees to help and again implores Brett to take over the mantle of the Lone Ranger. When Brett refuses, John goes to see Jesse Owens, the famous Olympian who stood up to Hitler, and asks him. Jesse agrees, but it doesn't work. Jesse Owens is too famous. The Lone Ranger has to be someone no one knows in order to be able to hide behind the mask. In the meantime, Brett has made a mask from the Lone Ranger brother Daniel's, who is Britt Reed's grandfather, vest, just as the Lone Ranger did. I don't think that was previous canon, at least I couldn't find any other references to it, but it made for a nice touch. Aside from the incredible action shots in the book, shout out to Giovanni Timpano and the artist, and Pete Pansies as the colorist for their work. My favorite part of these series are the interactions between Kato and Tonto, including probably the best advice that Tonto could have given Kato. You are Japanese as I was Indian, so be wary of entering towns alone and sustaining cowardly beatings from ignorant men. Unfortunately, Tonto doesn't get much of a story arc in this book, and that's a shame. This unfortunately was the staple of the Lone Ranger serial and television show, and a reflection of the reality of the time, as well as a hint of what was to come with the Japanese internment camps. Ultimately, the Lone Ranger and the Green Hornet prevail, but both the Lone Ranger and Tonto die and are given a hero's funeral. Well, the Lone Ranger's is. The funeral is attended by many luminaries, including Clark Kent, The Shadow, and FDR. I want to close out by talking about the strained Batman connection. I know Michael Uslan is famous for reviving Batman, but there are several pages of this limited run series dedicated to making the connection between the Reed family and the Wayne families. The implication is that the Green Hornet is a second or third cousin to Batman. I appreciate what he is trying to do with this, but to be honest, it took me out of what was an otherwise enjoyable story to make a connection that doesn't need to be there. The Lone Ranger is a compelling story, as is the Green Hornet. To see these two amazing heroes ride together was really enjoyable, and it would be nice to see these amazing heroes get more attention. I feel they've both suffered because of the overwhelming presence of Marvel and DC heroes, and let's be honest, because of the two very poorly received movies. The series is no longer available to order from Dynamite, but you can pick up individual issues on eBay, and the trade paperback is available at Amazon, as well as a Kindle version of the trade paperback. Michael Uzon obviously loved the source material and understand these characters, and it really is a great read. I'd highly recommend checking it out if you get a chance. Thank you as always for watching, and look forward to more videos.